A very good evening to all of you, and please join me in welcoming Ms. Apurva Purohit, a distinguished leader. Today, she's going to talk about the evolution of media, the potential and pitfalls for marketers. It's a very, very interesting topic from a very interesting speaker and leader who has agreed to join us this evening with us. On behalf of ICFAI and all the participants, ma'am, I would like to extend a warm welcome and gratitude for your time and expertise for this session that you're going to share with us. Allow me to share my screen and I'll do a brief intro. After that, I'll hand it over back to you, ma'am, for your talk. Yeah, these are Wise Views leadership conversations. For the record, this is the 60-second leadership conversation that we are having, and this is the first in this month of July. The topic is the evolution of media, potential and pitfalls for marketeers. Agenda is very simple. The first 20-25 minutes is a talk by the leader, Ms. Apurva Purohit, and later we'll have a Q&A moderated by my colleague, Professor Prasad, and myself. I take this opportunity to introduce her. Ms. Apurva Purohit is an Indian businesswoman with over 3 decades of experience in the corporate world, where she formed significant partnerships with private equity firms and promoters to build and scale up a diverse set of businesses ranging from early stage fledgling businesses to setting up new ventures and to supervising turnarounds in mature and declining organizations. Currently, Ms. Apurva has launched Aazol Ventures Private Limited, a consumer products company which aims to create a market for traditional food items made by self-help groups and micro-entrepreneurs by reconnecting Indian consumers with their roots and the local foods of their regions. She's also an independent director at Mindtree Limited, L&T Technology Services, and Naveen Florin International Limited and Marico Limited. Big, huge organizations and huge responsibilities. She has also been an accomplished author. Ms. Apurva has been a leading voice in the Indian business landscape, advocating gender diversity, what ails it, and what organizations and leaders can do to improve this critical imperative. She is also the author of 2 national best-selling books, Lady, You're Not a Man, The Adventures of a Woman at Work, and the other one is Lady, You're the Boss. Through her books, Ms. Apurva aims to empower women and encourage them to achieve their full potential. Over the years, Ms. Apurva has won multiple business awards and has been named as one of the most powerful women in business by the India Today Group and Fortune India. She was amongst LinkedIn's top voices and Your Story's top 10 digital influencers of 2020, and recently won the Distinguished Alumni Award from her alma mater, IIM Bangalore, in 2022. Ms. Apurva holds a bachelor's degree in physics and completed her PGDM from IIM Bangalore. She was a state-level hockey player and represented Tamil Nadu State and Tamil Nadu University as well. Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you very much. And once again, welcome to you. And I'm sure the audience will enjoy this session. I will also introduce my co-panelist, Professor R. Prasad. He is the Director of Academic Wing at ICFAI Group. He brings with himself a rich experience of 3 decades as an entrepreneur, as a professional in the corporate world, also in the academic world, all put together. Professor Prasad comes from IIT Mumbai with his BTech degree and his PGDM from IIM Kolkata. Welcome, Professor Prasad. And thank you. So with this, I now request ma'am to start her session. We are eagerly waiting, ma'am, to listen to you on this very, very interesting topic on media. Welcome once again, and over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm very pleased to be here with all the people who are participating in this subject, which is very close to my heart, given that I have spent my entire 32 years working in some form of media or another, right from, the days of Doordarshan, where all that you could have for entertainment was either the 9 p.m. news or Chitrahar on Wednesdays and Hindi feature film on Sundays. And today where, education, information, etc. is available to us on tap digitally. So there has been a huge, huge evolution in media. And with evolution, the pace of change is, I think, becoming even faster, and where change used to take a decade to happen, now it's taking practically, days and weeks in which change is happening. So let's talk about some of the trends and in media, and let's also look at how they are likely to impact marketeers, and how marketeers, whether they're in the social sphere, in the service sphere, or in the product sphere, how they need to think about how to use these meta trends in media. Let me just start. I'll just share my screen here. So I think the last 2 years obviously have been a time of seminal change for every industry, every individual, every country, every ecosystem. And I think, when such massive tectonic changes happen in the way we live our lives, in the patterns and habits that we are used to, of course, there's a huge negative, and we know how devastating these 2 years have been for economies, for health, for mental health, physical health, etc. Equally, it is a well-known fact that when such tectonic changes happen, post these changes, there is also moments of repair and rejuvenation, of innovation and creativity. Much of creativity in the past and innovation of the past has followed such kind of crises and such kind of changes. So I think whether it is media, whether it is marketing, whether it is any industry, the moment just now is equally a moment of darkness. Inflation is peaking, margins are going down, health and safety of everybody is still a concern, but equally there are opportunities that are available, and it is now up to us, up to generations who are going to take on the mantle of running businesses and brands and marketing and other services, of how they are going to exploit the trends and how are they going to use it to build further innovation. So what I want to do, I want to talk about 5 trends that we are observing in media and the ramifications of these trends onto marketers and brand managers. And I think the first trend that we are seeing in our lives, equally in how people are interacting with brands and services, is this whole hybridization. So whether it is our workplaces, whether it is hybrid cars, whether it is the model where we say we look around and say that customers now want to not just move digital, not just remain physical, but try and sort of marry the two. So there was a period where everybody thought, oh, physical is dead, brick and mortar is dead. And now everybody will move on to digital, 100% translation of digital will happen. But that hasn't happened, and that can never happen. I mean, nothing in life is a binary of 0, 1. It's always gray. And indeed, whether it is retail, whether it is how we are living our lives, it is a mix of digital and physical. So marketers are using both online and offline worlds to get closer to the customer. So if there is a D2C brand, they are now thinking of launching a retail stores. If it is a brick and mortar brand, they are thinking of now going online. Equally, the customer experience has changed. So customers are today blending the online and offline experience. So sometimes you may go to a store to touch and feel the brand, buy online. Sometimes you may do your homework online, your research and search of different brands online, and go offline to pick up the product. So I think fact is that research is telling us, and we also know it because that's how we as customers are behaving, that 78% of respondents of most researchers today are telling you that we buy both online and offline. We believe in the phygital model. And in a country like India, which is so much more complex and complicated than other countries, obviously this trend is magnified manyfold. So the top 1% may be behaving in a particular manner, the next 10% in another manner, urban India in a particular manner, rural India in another manner. Fact remains, everybody is trying to make sense of this hybrid interactions, whether it is with each other, whether it is with families interacting on WhatsApp and meeting once in a while, or whether it is in how we purchase goods and services. The phygital hybridized model is here to stay. And I think all of us need to recognize and be comfortable with living in this reality. What does it say about media? And I think what has really happened to media and how media is bought and sold in our country, I think we have been operating in false binaries. So if you talk to an FMCG marketing and media person, they'll say, oh, my customer is a TV customer, and today, of course, an OTT customer. Someone else will say a car manufacturer and marketer will say, my customer is an outdoor customer, so I have to use outdoor media. Someone else will say, I'm an education brand. If I need to explain something to my customer, I have to go in print. And therefore, TV versus print versus outdoor versus digital now. That is how people see. They're saying traditional media has died, digital is the new place to be in. And just like how we got confused about the digital and physical world, we are confused about using media like that. And we are operating in a false binary that either your television or your digital, either your print or your outdoor. But actually, it's not true. It's now not true at all for the customer who for years has always been a hybrid consumer. So as I told you, I have seen media from 1989 to now. And I can say that every 10 years, one hears about the death of some medium or the other. TV is dead, print is dead, radio is dead, so on and so forth. However, if you look at what's happening at the consumer end, this is all the speak of a marketeer and a media planner. Oh, TV is dead, print is dead. But if you look at a consumer, their engagement, their time spent with media has not gone down, despite new and new media coming in everywhere. So if you look at 2010 and the reach of TV, radio, print, and internet. Of course, internet was a baby at that time. And look at 2019. Yes, of course, internet grew hugely, but the reach of print also grew. The reach of radio also grew. The reach of television also grew. Yes, of course, people started surfing the net and spending 1 hour on the net, watching content 1 hour on the net. But it's not that the time spent with television went down or time spent listening to radio went down. Our overall consumption of media has gone up. So the reality is no medium comes and replaces another medium. We just invite a new medium in our life and we just make space for it as consumers. Today, we are spending close to 7 to 9 hours interacting with different forms of media, which was maybe two hours earlier. So every medium is growing. Every consumer is a media hybrid consumer. I think that's the way marketers need to look at both the consumption and the usage of media. Repeatedly, there is research which talks about combining different media and the efficacy that one gets if various media are combined. So I'm not going to run through all these in detail, but just to give you a sense, the more you add a multiple medium to your plan, the better is your result, whether it is in terms of brand awareness, whether it is in terms of the efficiency, whether it is in terms of the multiplier effect of your media plan. And indeed, that is exactly how the consumer behaves. He goes out, he sees a product in a shop, and then while driving back, because either he's seen that product, he remembers the outdoor hoarding. Because he sees the outdoor hoarding, he remembers the television campaign. Because he's seen a television campaign, he's more likely to click onto the sponsored Google ad that comes on his laptop. I think customers are getting stimulus at different points. Yes, some stimulus they may just not get, or they may not be aware of in a very conscious manner, but they are getting stimulus from all media. And the more multiple your media plan, the higher is likely to be its efficiency, because that's how our consumer is. Unfortunately, most media buyers and marketers have forgotten this about media and think of it as very separate, silo-based consumer interactions. So that is the first point I'm making on first trend, which is becoming further and further enhanced, the hybridization of our lives and the hybrid media consumer, which already existed, and that's only increasing. The second trend that we are all observing in media is the fact that as content is increasing in the amount, the quantity of content we get, the times we get content from morning to night, just getting stimulus after stimulus of different notifications on our phones, on our laptops, in somebody on our television sets, the more content is increasing, the lesser its credibility is going. Reuters did a study in 2020, and they said that less than 4 in 10, which is just 38% of people who listen to or watch news, they said that they trust the news that they ingest. Less than half, 46% said that they trust the news they use themselves. And the trust in search and social media is even lower. So yes, our consumer is consuming news. They are sitting in front of their television and watching all the news channels. They are listening to news on their phones. They are seeing it on WhatsApp. They're seeing it on Facebook, but they don't end up believing that news, which indeed is a very, very sad part. And I think that is what most populists today, most politicians today, many, I would say, brands with less integrity are using, where they're just stuffing the internet with any kind of information. Have this particular powder and it'll cure cancer. Do this, do you know what this other political party is doing? So we are just getting stuffed with incorrect news. And the more we are consuming this, the lesser and lesser we are believing it. And I think a meta philosophical question to ask at this stage is that if you don't trust the partner you are interacting with, whether it is in news, whether it is in buying a brand, what are you going to believe? When there is a genuinely good brand, when there is a genuinely good politician, when there is genuine news and fact-based news that you are getting, what are you going to believe it? And those are going to be the collateral damages of what is happening today, that we are being fed with fake news, our credibility levels are going down, and when we get genuine news, we are apt to disbelieve it. So what will we do? What will brands do? What will marketers do? What should media do? And I think if you see where really there is credibility in media or trust in brands, you will realize that the highest credibility even now is in print and radio. I know because I have run print, radio, digital, television, every type of medium. I know when I was running a print brand, people would say, for example, Inkalab, which is a very, very small brand in the Jagran kitty, which I ran last. People would say that we don't even throw away the paper because we have so much respect for what is coming there. Now, why is it so? Why is it that in days and years that we have gone through of insecurity, we have gone back to some of the older brands, some of the more nostalgia-driven brands that we used to consume? And that is because of two factors. One, that they have been there for years. So you will trust a brand, you will trust a media platform, you will trust a newspaper which has been around for 50 years and 60 years and 100 years, just because of the legacy of time. The other more important thing to remember is trust is nothing but consistency over time. So the more consistent you are in your output and the longer time you have spent being consistent in your output, the higher is the trust in you as a person or a brand or a media. And I want each of you to reflect on this. I meet a lot of brand managers, marketing managers who every 2 years want to say that कुछ नया करते हैं, चलो ब्रांड का लोगो बदल देते हैं, चलो ब्रांड की टैगलाइन बदल देते हैं, चलो ब्रांड का प्रॉमिस बदल देते हैं. Equally, there are a lot of startups and new brands who will come and say, okay, let me launch a shampoo brand. Today, I will talk about the shine it gives to your hair. Then I have only 3 months, 6 months of patience before the money that I collected from my VC runs out. So now it's not working. Let me quickly change shine of my brand to saying that it gives you, it prevents hair fall. Then hair fall doesn't work, and 3 months later, I change it to saying that it takes care of dandruff. Why will anybody trust this brand? What is the true promise? What is it based on? Why are you saying what you are saying? I think these are the things that we have to be very, very clear about. The customer is not an idiot, as we've, who, all of us who've been advertising know. David Ogilvy once said that the customer is not a fool, she's your wife. And I think that's what we need to all understand. That if you're keeping on changing your promise, if you're keeping on basing your offering, basing your positioning on incorrect facts, you will never be able to be either consistent or be able to gain trust. So it's built over time, whether for human relationships, whether for relationships with brands or platforms. Secondly, trust gets built when you are consistently delivering the same thing. If I know that every time I open that Amul ice cream or Amul butter or Amul cheese, I will get exactly the same taste, exactly the same consistency of the butter. And that's how trust gets built up. Suddenly, if I open the butter and once it's yellow and once it's light yellow and the third time the consistency is different, how will I build trust? So whether you're a service brand, I enter the bank branch and I get the same treatment, whether I'm in Bandra, whether I'm in Bhopal. I open a can of Amul cheese and I get the same consistency, quality, taste. I open the newspaper and I know that this is ratified, fact-based news. That is how trust builds. I think that is something, and it is boring. To be consistent is boring because kuch naya nahi hota, but that is how trust will get built up for brands over a period of time. And here's where I think all of us need to reflect and introspect about all the trends that we are seeing around us and how as marketeers we pick up fads and say, this is a fad that we must, because this is a growing trend which we have to capitalize on, which is, for example, the recent trend of riding on these instant micro influencers. So, oh my God, this mom influencer has 1 million views. She must endorse my brand and immediately it will become a success. This celebrity has become a celebrity because she was in Big Boss. I must get her on as my brand ambassador and then I don't need to worry about. Influencers are not silver bullets that will help you. And influencers, if picked wrongly, will actually detract from your brand promise and your brand story and make your brand less credible. Unfortunately, in this desire to show quick wins, in this desire to just chase reach, we end up, so there is a fashionista mom influencer with 1 million followers. One day she's endorsing butter. One day she's endorsing a handbag. One day she's endorsing another handbag. One day she's endorsing a travel site. What is she known for? She can't be doing everything, right? But she's got 1 million followers, so 100 brands will chase her. Do you think the customer is trusting a fashionista mom influencer with 1 million followers who's been endorsing handbags with a nutritional porridge that you may be selling? Obviously not, but we don't think of it like that. The millions of influencer marketing agencies that have got set up just come with, when you ask them, give me a list of influencers that I can use, they don't even want to understand your brand. They don't even want to understand what your value and positioning of your brand is. They will just give you the top 10 influencers based on reach. And we also, as marketeers and brand owners, select these influencers based on their reach. And I think what we are not understanding is that it is doing nothing to build your brand value, nothing to build your credibility. And again, I want you to reflect on that equation: consistency over time. It will take time. 1 million followers is not going to immediately translate into 1 million sales. Think about who you want associated with your brand. think about the credibility of the brand first and the reach second. The third interesting trend that we are seeing is that day by day, the rich interaction of consumers with media is going up. So at a point in time in the 90s, it was a very passive reach-led engagement. So you just sat in front of the television, whatever the television threw up, you saw. You went to see a cinema, whatever. So it was only a voice. We used to call it the voice of God talking down to you. So ads were also made like that and said, Sab se safed, and you just heard it passively. Then over a period of time in 2000, when more and more media came into our country, everybody started not only looking at reach, but also worrying about the opportunity to see. So am I seeing the ad more than once in the Hindi feature film or in Ramayana? Where else am I seeing the ad? Am I seeing it on television and in print and in the outdoor medium that I'm engaging with? And then today it has become not only reach plus OTS, it's become huge amount of interaction. Not only interaction, it has become huge amount of UGC. So I'm not only engaging with the content that you are giving me, but I'm also becoming a content supplier. I'm interacting more and more, so that now there is no difference between the medium and me. Snapchat and me are one and the same. WhatsApp and me are one and the same, because I've now formed my communities on WhatsApp with whom I also give content and I also receive content. And therefore, there has been this huge intersection and increased engagement with media. But the question to ask is, from passive reach to this high engagement, consumer has completely changed their equation, their interaction, the way they behave and interact with media. But along with the consumer, have the media buyers and sellers changed their way of behaving? Have they changed their way of buying and selling media? Unfortunately, no. Whether it is print, whether it is radio, whether it is digital, you will never meet a buyer or a seller of media who will discuss anything except cost per thousand. Media buying and selling is and has become a commodity. It is like buying dal and chawal and saying ki kitna price mein mujhe the best rice is the one that I get the cheapest. Why is it so? Media agencies on the one hand are under great pressure to deliver value to clients. Otherwise, the clients will say, okay, I'm going from media agency A to media agency B. So the only way they can demonstrate value is by getting you the lowest possible cost per thousand of the media plan that they are offering you. Equally, the media sellers are to blame, because they have refused to change the matrix of measurement. It was when it was a passive reach-led engagement of the consumer, they still used to sell on cost per thousand. You do Hindi feature film, this is your cost per thousand. You do Chitrahar, this is your cost per thousand. You do ZTV, this is your cost per thousand. You do Star, this is your cost per thousand. Today, when there is so much better measurement available, and indeed my hope was that with this digital revolution, digital which is able to actually track the consumer, actually able to give the habits of the consumer. What is that consumer consuming? At what time is he or she on Facebook and on TikTok and on YouTube? What is the behavior of this consumer? There is so much rich data available, but the media seller or the media buyer has still not been able to change the metrics from cost per thousand to cost per conversion, let us say, cost per engagement, cost per credibility of the medium, cost per propensity to buy. They have not changed. It is still a commoditized way of buying and selling media, and that is a travesty and a tragedy for both marketeers and for the media community, and which is so visible in the consumption or in the money that is being spent on media. You know, when I first started working, everybody would say that one day the media spends in our country would catch up to the spends that are there internationally. Unfortunately, in India, media spends still remain very insignificant. The per capita spend on media in the US is $2,200. In China is $200. In India is just about $32. And this figure has not changed. The fifth point that I want to make to you is internationally, I am seeing this trend that some of the better media organizations are understanding that if we have to be credible, we cannot rely on advertising to support us, because the moment you ask for advertising to support you, you fall in the trap of being pressured by advertisers to say what they want you to say. I think organizations and brands such as New York Times, Washington Post, in India, Business Standard, Midday are realizing that we give great content. If we want the consumer to be given credible content which costs money, we should make the consumer pay for content. And slowly but surely, some of the innovators in media are gathering the courage to get consumers to pay for content. And I think consumers too need to realize it, that only if I am willing to pay for content will I get quality content. If I'm not willing to pay for content, the media platform has no choice but to rely on advertising. If they have no choice but to rely on advertising, then I cannot hope to get credible quality content, because then the media platform will be answerable to the advertiser and not to the consumer. So in summary, I think there are five trends that are playing out in India, and I think each of the trends have a positive face to it and a negative face to it. It is up to you and me to figure out how do we exploit and expand on these trends. And the five trends are media and our lifestyles have increasingly become phygital and hybrid. How do I, as a marketer, benefit from this phygital? How do I change my marketing thinking? How do I change my media thinking to benefit from this phygital hybrid model? The second thing is brands and media platforms that can command credibility, either because they are legacy brands or because they have been consistently making the same fact-based promise. Those are the brands that will become power brands in this age of fake news and uncertainty. The third trend is that we have to be very, very careful about what type of trend do we want to ride on, what type of people, platform, media choices we are making, which build on our brand's credibility and don't detract for them. Unfortunately, the commoditized purchase of media has eroded the value of the entire media industry. Both sides are equally culpable, and the industry leaders, the captains of the industry, people who are entering the media industry, unless we force a better way of measuring media, we will continue to get the lowest common denominator and not the best out of our media by getting consumers to pay for content is the only way to both de-risk the media business model and to ensure credibility for all platforms and therefore for marketers. And I think we need to learn the engagement with media is only going up. It's 9 hours per day currently. We need to learn to leverage all these trends if we want to create value for both the marketer and for the media platform. But for that, it requires an innovative mindset and a willingness to go against trends sometimes, a willingness to say, I'm not going to measure my media plan on CPT to succeed. And I think the choice is yours and mine. Thank you.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you very much. That's been a fantastic lecture and discussion points that you have given us. I think it's a huge area that we are talking about today in this session, very beautifully captured from meta trends to macro trends. And I don't want to even lose 1 minute by repeating all that you have said. I have actually jotted down every single point. I'm sure all the members in the audience also have done the same. I must also mention here that some of the leaders from media industry also have joined. I can see their names and I can recognize most of them. I welcome all of them to this session. I'm sure they're enjoying. I will open the mics for them if they have any questions to ask directly to ma'am. I will open. You can raise your hand and I'll open the mic to talk. I welcome all the leaders from academics. Professor Sharma, most welcome. I can see your name. Dr. Alicia. We have Mrs. Vasanti Rao, MDRA. She's also on the ASCII board. I'm sure she'll have a few things to suggest and help us learn on how do we handle these fake news and what is the regulation mechanism that they are putting in place. And several other leaders from various walks of life. I welcome all of you. I'll quickly now move to the second part of this session, that is the Q&A. Without wasting any more time, may I request Professor Prasad to quickly get onto it. And I got an alert that ma'am will have to leave by 5 p.m. I request her to stay on for a little longer because the Q&A session, in my experience, is that it will take a little longer than anticipated. I'll leave it to you, ma'am. You can let us know to what extent you can stretch the discussion. But it has been a pleasure listening to you, I must tell you. You have made it very simple. All these points that you have enumerated are the decision points for marketers like us, marketers like many of the people who are around the screen today in their daily decisions of choosing media, thinking in silos, and building credibility and trust for themselves and their brands and organizations and platforms. So very, very relevant. It cannot get better than this. Over to you, Professor Prasad, for your first cluster of questions.
Thank you, Professor Rao. Thank you, ma'am. It has been a very insightful landscape of the evolution as well as things that matter most in that, which you have presented to us, and I'm sure the audience would have appreciated it. I'll get straight down to the question. In the beginning, we'll change tack slightly. It is more a bit about yourself and what you're currently doing, and then we'll move back to media. Ma'am, the first question is about your new venture, Aazol, and your involvement in Aazol. What got you into this field, and how does it relate to your previous journey?
So firstly, the brand is called Aazol. Aazol in Marathi means the home of your grandmother. And the whole idea for the genesis of this brand was twofold. So one is that all of you may know that I've been very involved in women empowerment, and I very much believe that if the world has to be a better place and the GDP of the world has to improve, it can only do on the back of equality, and especially at the bottom of the pyramid. So what the brand does is we source very beautiful, lovely, tasty, curated foods from all over rural Maharashtra, and we've created a D2C platform for it, and we sell the products sourced from self-help groups and from women entrepreneurs, micro women entrepreneurs from some remote areas of Maharashtra, food products that we used to eat when we were children, which is why the name of the home of your grandmom, and which are also very wholesome and healthy. And we distribute it across the country, across the world. The other side of the equation, of course, was that in the pandemic, I think all of us realized that health is of primary importance, and health is really something that we will only get if we take care of our food habits, our exercise, our lifestyle, and going back to nourishing, wholesome food of the regions from where we are. I think all dietitians today will tell you, eat the food don't eat the quinoa that comes from, apart from the fact that it has a bad carbon footprint, it is also unhealthy. Eat the rices of your local, eat as much local food as possible. So I think this was the reason that I launched the brand. What does it have to do with my previous media life? Nothing. But I think when you run organizations and businesses, I've been running businesses for 25 years as a CEO. There are certain patterns that emerge, and patterns you learn of how do you run successful brands and businesses. And I'm hopefully applying those patterns here.
Thank you, ma'am. I think, you centered in on the most important point, women empowerment. And I think the social angle, which is also involved in what you do, which is a big gap post-COVID than it was before COVID. We now move on to the women empowerment part, ma'am. I think you have written 2 books, and when you reflect on those books and you'd like to inform the audience, you've talked about glass ceiling versus leaky pipeline framework. What is your advice to women who are either sitting in the audience who listen to it, or their partners or some friends who may want to inform them about this? What's your advice to them? How do they manifest their aspiration?
So I think, I would break up my advice in two sections. One is for the younger women who are listening. I don't know how many younger women and younger men who are listening. And I think, I've seen this again across my corporate career, that very enthusiastically we used to recruit women, very enthusiastically young women would join us. And, you yourself know from academia that women are doing so well as students. They're really, the top rankers, they are motivated, they are ambitious. Many of them have fought to study. And the first 3-4 years of a woman's journey in a corporate world go beautifully. They do very well, they are ambitious, charged, motivated. But from the age of 26 to around 35, most women, and it is a fact which is even true in 2022 as it was true in 1980, most women leave their job because of the pressure of getting married, small children, the guilt that comes with having a small baby and leaving the baby at home, the lack of support that they get from home. And we know that nearly half, if not more, women leave their corporate career or their careers in the first decade of working. And that is so unfortunate, which is why I call it the leaky pipeline, because by the time the glass ceiling approaches, there are no women left also to become CEOs. They've all left. So my advice to women of that age and the men around that age is, you cannot afford to let go. It is very difficult to come back should you want to try. Children will grow up and go away. Then what will you do? It is a difficult journey in the first 10 years, but keep at it. Hard work will pay off. And I think the true independence that you will get is when you're financially independent. So I think we have to remember that, and we have to always tell our minds that it's not an either or. A successful career or a happy family life. You can have both. It is an and I think that's you have to say it's not either or, it's and. My message to the slightly more senior women who've reached middle level or who've reached the top is again the fact that at this stage you have become and should become role models for younger women. When they watch you, when they see you, and having role models is one of the most powerful ways that senior women that women will stay back in the workforce, because when they see, otherwise the default gender of leadership is male. If you see an organization, if you see a panel, if you see a CXO boardroom which is only full of men, you lose confidence in yourself. Therefore, it is so important to have visible women leaders in public places, so that our younger girls feel empowered to reach the top.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I think they are very specific, very practicable. And I think some reflection has to be done by the individuals concerned to make it operational. The next question, ma'am, is about the leadership lessons, the most important leadership lesson that you'd like to share with us based on your journey.
There are many lessons. There are many. I mean, obviously, when you look back and then you think, okay, what worked and what helped one succeed. So there are many leadership lessons, but the one that I use as a single point that I keep on telling different people in different forums is this whole concept of personal accountability. And the point I make on personal accountability is that, when so there's a psychology report which talks about, young children who, when they're 2 and 3 years old and they lose a ball, they come back and they're not feeling bad about it because they're saying the ball got lost. So the mother's going around helping them find the ball again. The same child, when he's 5 and 6 years old, now this time she comes back, and when she loses the ball, she says she's crying and she's saying, I lost the ball. From the ball got lost to I lost the ball. And I think that, they say in psychology, is the transition to adulthood, to accept responsibility for having lost the ball. And I think that is the most powerful leadership lesson. Are you accepting responsibility for your life? Are you accepting responsibility for the messes and the failures in your life? The moment you say it is my mess, it is because of something wrong I did, your mind starts offering solutions to you. But the moment you say, what could I do? It's the economy's fault. It's the political leader's fault. It's my boss's fault. It's my wife's fault. Your mind is not going to come out with solutions because it's not your fault. So I think A good leader is a leader who accepts responsibility for his circumstances, for what's happening around her, and that helps her come up with solutions. And for me, that is the single most important trait a good leader has.
Excellent, ma'am. Personal accountability, or what they call internal locus of control, I think absolutely spot on. Very simple to understand and reflect on for each of us. The next question, ma'am, is about the technology trends which are invading media. We have got AR, VR, cryptos, metaverse. Are these applications beginning to be used in media? To what extent do you see these Indian media using these applications in the next few years?
So I think media, in a sense, will evolve as the customer, the consumer wants it to evolve. So a lot of this AR, VR, if the customer needs it, if the customer understands it, if the customer uses it, I think media just follows, and media follows, the advertising dollars follow, and then it becomes a virtuous circle. So I think, of course, there will be changes and evolutions. And as I talked about the hybrid model, today we are talking about the phygital model. The phygital model is, okay, you go to a store and then you buy online, or you see it online and then you then you go to a store to feel it. Tomorrow, who knows, online itself will be able to make you touch and feel. I keep on hearing reports about how, in the metaverse, in the 3D world, you will be actually able to smell the perfume rather than having to go to a store. Now, these evolutions will happen. These evolutions must happen. And I think the evolutions are larger than saying that it's the interface between media and consumer. Our lives are changing, and I think media has to evolve to follow that.
Excellent, ma'am. I think you put it on demand, and I think the customer will drive it, and it will be based on how the trends there happen.
Correct.
Last question, ma'am, in this cluster is about the video streaming industry. It is growing, and we've been reading about Netflix facing challenges. How does this industry make money? How can they work on their profitability? What are your thoughts on this?
So I think, firstly, I strongly believe that content must pay for itself. And I strongly believe that every platform or media business which has tried to rely on advertising for its profitability is not a long-term business model. Finally, we have to understand who is the person who is consuming that content. It is the consumer. If the consumer wants quality content, the consumer should be willing to pay for it. It is as simple as that. Now, you may get them to pay for it in this decade or the next decade, or as the per capita income evolves. That is secondary. That is a question of timing. But content has to get paid for by the person who is consuming it. I remember in 2003, when I was running Zee TV, Subhash Chandra and I used to go for investor conferences, and we used to say, one day, 50% of our revenues will come from subscription. And, the investors and analysts used to laugh at us because it was 100% coming out of advertising, and there was no scope of, there was all those cable operators, and there was a lot of leakage happening at that time and so on. So nobody used to take us seriously. But because at that moment he said that, and because at that moment Zee TV started working on it, it took 10 years. But there came a time where 50%, and that's, according to me, the success of television versus print. Television is doing better because a lot of money is coming from subscription. Print is still relying on advertising and still losing money for every additional copy that it.
Absolutely, ma'am. I think you again hit the nail on the head in terms of simplicity of how you're thinking. There is absolute clarity that it needs to be subscriptions.
But Professor Prasad, to reach this simplicity, you have to go through a very complex journey in life.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. So it's your experience which has allowed you to voice it and articulate it so well. Thank you very much, ma'am. I think with the kind of experience that you have in all the organizations which you have been in, There's far more that we can understand from you, but we'll end it here due to lack of time, and I'll pass it back to Professor Rao.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm enjoying this conversation and these questions are very interesting. At the time of registration, all the participants key in their questions and we curate these questions and landscape properly so that our discussion is in a proper sequence. So we finished one cluster and there are many more questions, but I'll shortlist a few and then request you to respond. One of the participants is asking, how should marketers leverage radio? I'm sure this is coming from the fact that you led Radio City to a leadership position, and therefore the question, how should marketers leverage radios in their media portfolio? Are there specific industries for which radio works better?
So, when I first joined radio 2005, radio was always treated as a frequency medium, that it is there somewhere and any leftover money should be put on radio, and it can only help in frequency building. It cannot help in brand building, etc. Over a period of time, unfortunately, this perception of radio has not changed dramatically. But having said that, there have been several very clever advertisers who have used radio for quick recall building, for locally efficient media solutions. And today I see a lot of advertisers very intelligently using radio and the influencers on radio to build their brand, their story, their communication at a local level. So I think, because it's a medium that nobody sort of sees, it doesn't have the larger than life aspect that maybe a television has. The RJs on radio have never been given their due. And I know for a fact that especially in tier 1 and tier 2 towns, the RJs have, almost celebrity idol level status. The connection that people feel with these RJs is of a very, very intense level. They've been stalked, they've been chased, they have letters, they have fans chasing them. How do you I spoke about how this trend of micro-influencers and using the wrong influencers can harm the brand. Sometimes using the right influencers can help. So I think, for example, let's take Radio City. The RJs of Radio City have, because they've been there for 15 years, consistency over time, doing the same show, day after day, moment after moment. That consistency has given them a level of credibility and trust. How do you use that credibility and trust for yourself? I think these are some of the ways that advertisers can intelligently use radio.
Awesome. Very, very interesting, ma'am. I think you have taken us back to the framework which you explained earlier, that consistency in output over a period of time builds your trust in people, relationships, as well as brands. So it applies to radio extremely well, as in the example of RJs. So local businesses can innovatively use micro-influencers, namely RJs, and actually work for quick recall as well as brand building. That's a fantastic thing. Second question, ma'am, is you have in your presentation talked about many aspects at a macro level, but what are the specific 1 or 2 trends in social media that the marketers should be aware of?
Social media, yeah. So social media has its own set of fads, trends, things that come today and disappear tomorrow, etc. So I would say, as for example, we at Aazol are building our brand on social media. I think there is a lot of power to social media. In a way, today it is one of the easiest and cheapest ways to connect with your consumer. Equally, if not thought through carefully, you can go very, very wrong in social media. So I would say, 2 things I would think about very deeply. And the first thing I alluded to earlier, which is when I said that I think we have to be very careful about how we are using the platforms. So let us just go back to the history of why these platforms started in the first place. And I think all of the platforms originally, whether it was Facebook or Insta or Snap or Twitter, started where there were communities that got attracted, and communities started getting formed. So there was a type of person who was a Facebook community member. There was another type who would got onto Twitter. There's a third type who got onto Insta. And originally that was what the intent of all these platforms were, to create these small, large, mega communities. So someone from Africa, someone from Asia, and someone on bonding together on a certain value or a certain ethos. I think this community feeling of platforms has got eroded to some extent, but to a certain extent is there. So when you are thinking of social media, who is the core community of LinkedIn? Who is the core community of TikTok? Who's the core community of Twitter? I think a communication has to address and be specific to that community. Unfortunately, I just think we just say, okay, we just look at now Facebook will allow a 1-minute video, YouTube will allow a 2-minute video, and Insta will allow 30 seconds. So let me just cut and put an edit here. The whole communication has to change, because a person who's, maybe it's the same person on Insta and the same person on Facebook, the way he's thinking when he's on Insta is very different from the way she's thinking when she's on Facebook. But I don't think we are getting this. So horses for courses and contextually being right in your communication is something that we are missing on social media.
Wonderful, ma'am. I think the genesis of this social media need to be understood in the right context, and then dovetail our presence as well as message with respect to the core community of that particular platform.
Very correct.
Awesome.
Very correct.
The next question, ma'am, what are the best analytical tools according to you that can help in identifying how marketers are performing? So it's like that question probably aims at understanding, is there any ready dashboard for assessing the performance marketing, something like that?
So I cannot technically answer this question, but again, I always like to go to first principles. And I think what are the first principles that whatever the media and whatever today digital is full of so much jargon. And when I've interacted with performance marketing agencies and SEO agencies, it's more complicated than, and everything is broken up in tiny silos and verticals, so that a marketer is totally lost. So I would urge all marketers to think about first principles. What are first principles of media? What is the basic thing? There's reach, there is frequency, and there is conversion. These are the three things. Now you can cost per click, cost per thousand, cost per impression per view, page view, plus this. All this is jargon. At the base of it, you monitor your reach, which will help you build awareness. You monitor your frequency, which will help you build recall, and you cost per click, or cost per conversion. Go back to first principles.
Super. I think that's a redux in terms of simplification, which comes from a huge number of years of experience. I think the earlier point also connects to this, ma'am, in terms of if you have a platform which is emerging as powerful like social media, if strategy is missing in that, and if you want to be there just because of peer pressure or everybody is wanting to be there, just like PR, a lot of people use PR because there are aisles of visibility, so they use PR without any strategy that connects. So that also helps here in terms of understanding how these analytical tools can be looked at. So reach, frequency, and conversion. Basically, reach will give you awareness, frequency, the recall, and conversion will give you business revenue. That's the mantra one has to write down. The other question, quickly, I'm moving to the other question, ma'am. What are the top emerging trends in digital marketing industry in the next 5 years?
I'm totally unqualified to answer what, and anybody who's sitting here and says, okay, I can tell you the top trends of the next 5 years. I'm sorry to say, I would, with a huge mountain of salt, I would not even want to hear that answer.
Sure. Thank you very much, ma'am. There is one question which is actually on the screen, and I would like to, Mr. Arun Kaul, would you like to ask the question yourself? We can open the mic for you so that we'll beat the monotony a little bit. Mr. Arun Kaul, you can come on screen.
The word of mouth, especially through friends and relatives, was very important. You know, if I wanted to buy, let us say, a fridge, and somebody said you're going for a Whirlpool, it's a very good, my experience has been very good. So in spite of all the TV ads and the newspaper ads and the crores of rupees that the advertiser spent, I would go by what my friend said or relative said. Now, how important is that today? And are the influencers, so-called influencers, really taking up that role?
So I think that's a very nuanced question, and I'm glad it was asked. So I would say, yes, influencers, and that's why the name influencers have a very powerful role to play in our lives, but I don't think they're reached anywhere close to word of mouth from friends and relatives. In fact, you know, the WhatsApp groups that are formed within families, I'm sure each one of us have 3 family groups on which we are there, WhatsApp groups. If a brand ever is able to infiltrate that group, that is really the single most powerful way of building credibility, building trust in the brand. So I would say that word of mouth of friends and relatives remains top of the pops. Influencers come a very distant second.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you very much. I think that's a pretty innovative and insightful thought. I'll also open the mic to Dr. Vidhu Mathur, but in the meantime, I will ask one more question, ma'am, and then we'll go to Dr. Vidhu. A lot of innovation that we are seeing, and innovation is a requirement, as you have mentioned in the beginning, when we were trying to understand the trends. Like from the gloom and the darkness, we need to move to innovation and creativity, and we need to make this life and business get going. What do you think are the innovative ways in which media houses are projecting themselves today? And what are those things which you suggest as well? One is the observation, other one is suggestion of how can innovatively media houses project themselves.
So, you know, I am presuming when you talk about media houses, you're talking of all the media businesses, whether it is Times of India or Netflix, right?
Correct.
So, you know, I think media houses don't need to project themselves. It is the content, in a sense, the service they provide, which needs to be able to be innovative, relevant, consumer friendly. Okay, so I would say that you know, the brand behind the content is lesser important than the content. And sometimes I do know that media houses try to position themselves within I will only make content which is women centric, or I don't think that's a great idea. I think one has to be in that sense just making great high quality content for different for different target groups. I would say that your projection or your brand building has to be in the content that you provide. I say this equally for editorial, for news business houses, and for entertainment. So entertainment is a lot about relevant, interesting, engaging content. News is a lot about relevant, credible, trustworthy content. So I think if you are able to say that, you know, my content, if you're a news provider, my content is fact checked, edited, only then it is given to you. So trust in what I say. Entertainment is saying that my content is relevant and engaging, watch it. I think that is how you need to, if I may say, position yourself.
The most honest positioning is to have the content that speaks for itself rather than artificially drawing up comparative positioning so that you win over the other media houses. I think that's a very, very fundamental and strong suggestion that you've given. Thank you very much, ma'am. And I'd like to request Dr. Vidhu Mathur to ask that question. Dr. Vidhu, okay, before he gains some voice, the question is, ma'am, would you agree that credibility of traditional media is under question with the democratization of media, namely social media, since apparently traditional media is organized and therefore biased? I mean, that's the question.
I think we are conflating two different points here. Of course, there has been democratization of news. Of course, it is so much easier to access information now. You just type in Maharashtra news, and there will be 100 sites on Google who will be telling you the answer to what is happening, right? But finally, where are they? Where even if you are getting news on your WhatsApp, on your Facebook feed, on Twitter from your friend, where are they getting the news from? Where is Google getting the news from? Ultimately, it is getting news from publishers, no? So you think that you are getting news from democratization has happened because who's going out on that standing outside Vidhan Sabha and doing the interviews? It's ultimately a publisher or a news channel only, no? Your neighbor is not gone outside there and stood in the legislative assembly. So this democratization is a little bit artificial. At the back, the content gatherers are still the publishers and the organized organized media sections that you're talking about. Indeed, I would say this democratization has yet another misnomer, and it is yet another inaccurate way of looking at thinking that just because it's democratized news, it is unbiased. Because and I know that the people we connect with, the people who are part of our WhatsApp group, of our Facebook timeline, are people who think like us. So you are not democratizing news. You are actually making it narrower and narrower because you are getting information from people who exactly think like you. So you have stopped actually listening to the opposite side because they are not even there on your timeline. So what are we saying that this is democratization of news? You have filtered out news that you don't agree with.
Awesome. That's a very comprehensive response. Thank you very much, ma'am. I'll request Professor Prasad if he has any question, and then I'll come back to wrap it up. We'll close it after that. One question if you have.
Okay, ma'am, this question has a perspective from those who are seeking jobs or looking at ventures. And the question is, what are the opportunities for engineers or management graduates who need to focus on media and entertainment industries for both careers and startups? What kind of opportunities exist?
I think media's always open to intelligent, talented people who have a passion for that. I know people who passed out of IIT and IIMs, and I passed out from IIM, and I chose media as a career. So I think there are great opportunities there. I also believe that, while creative people who want to write are naturally drawn towards media does require structure. Media does require analysis. As I was talking about, we don't even have detailed measurements available across so many of the metrics that are now coming out to measure customer engagement. I also believe that creativity needs a structure, and only structured creativity succeeds. So people with a mix of right and left brain, or some people left brain, some people right brain, is actually the right place for right type of people for the media industry. So I would encourage anybody who has a passion for media to try out and join a media company. You will enjoy it.
And for startups, ma'am, those who want to become entrepreneurs in that space?
So, I've been observing this, that again, because digital is the buzzword and there are so many startups in this whole ecosystem. So digital media, every alternate person is a digital consultant or a digital media agency. So unless there is some very specific niche area that one can get into, or one has an idea about, how do you figure out what works in content, because I think nobody still knows what really works in content and is able to develop some models around that. I think those would be the kind of places where one could possibly think of a startup. But don't go for, just because it's now, everybody's saying digital media agency, so let me also start another digital media agency.
So I think segmentation, targeting, positioning, the basic principles are required before one starts thinking about
even figure out what is the idea.
What is the idea? Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Back to Professor Rao.
Thank you. Ma'am, it's been a great session, and we will come to we have come to the end of this session. Thank you very much for your continued presence and responses that you've shared. I think we've also been consistent. Let me confess now. We've been holding these leadership conversations with some of the distinguished leaders like you. Most of them have been distinguished alumni awardees from some of the prestigious institutions like IIM Bangalore, IIM Ahmedabad, and various other institutions. These leaders have been creating that spark and spurring the conversations and making these budding leaders think a little better and reflect. So that's what we've been doing over the last 62 weeks without any interruption. With support from people like you, we hope to continue further and bring this knowledge sessions or these sessions of motivation and usefulness to people from various domains, how they can emerge as leaders and think in a comprehensive manner, the way you have helped us understand today. Hopefully we'll continue that, ma'am. So consistency definitely one day begets trust, and we strongly believe in that. And education, especially brands from education, will have to do that. We are also legacy. We have been there for the last 3.5 decades. So we need to do that. That was a very, very, very important takeaway, and also strongly relevant to what we are doing. The other points that you mentioned in terms of diversity and women empowerment touched our hearts, ma'am. It's not just the titles of the books that you have authored and they've been the best-selling books, but apart from that, how do we implement these things, take forward? For example, when we sponsor some of the events and conferences in our own small way, we also look for the diversity on the panels. Before sitting on the panel, before moderating a session, we'd like to ask the organizers, can we have a little more diverse? Can we have a woman on the panel? And can we have people from other businesses also on the panel? So slowly, ICFAI started asking these questions, and probably we are in the right direction. So it is a confirmation of a sorts when you raise that point that we need to reflect and take decisions in this regard. The third and the most important aspect which you mentioned is about don't go after these latest trends or micro-influencers game. We have actually not done, and most of the businesses, some of the alumni and startups that we incubate, we keep sharing with them in our own way. Wish we had the skill of telling as persuasively as you have done today. We'll pick it up sooner. To tell our young leaders not to go after these micro-influencers and burn their image and reputation, so to say, rather than money. Because if they aligned with some wrong influencer or wrong ambassador, I think the whole positioning of the brand would get damaged without actually having the potential to come back or bounce back. I think that's a very, very important trend. And the other thing is about the human tendency to live in communities, social or real. I think that's a very, very strong point that has impressed us in terms of the necessity to be in tribes and communities in real life also, and in small groups. And if we can actually, the way social media has actually originated, if we can get into meaningful communities, and we'll create the right word of mouth, especially those family groups. How difficult it is, I can imagine, but if one can learn the art of getting there, I'm sure the best word of mouth would come there. These are some of the important aspects. But the concerns and the pitfalls that you have mentioned are also thought-provoking. In this day and age of fake news, how do you command respect and credibility? I think these challenges we'll have, all of us, will have on a daily basis to keep thinking and reflecting as well, and working on trust. You do something, there is an erosion of trust. If you don't do something, there is an erosion of trust. And similarly, when you take certain decisions also, so it's not easy. It's the challenging do's and challenging don'ts. Between these, the real power of decision making happens. So salute to you, how you managed your businesses for 25 years as CEO. I'm sure day in, day out, you would have lived with such dilemmas and challenges we are so fortunate that you are with us today to share these, some of the most distilled leadership lessons with us. And as you said, whenever there is a dilemma, go back to the first principles, whether it is media or non-media. So thank you very much, ma'am. With this, I would once again thank you on behalf of all my colleagues at ICFAI, as well as those distinguished members who have joined from India and abroad, all parts of the country. I thank them for raising good questions and making this conversation a wonderful conversation with someone like you, answering and responding to all the queries. Thank you very much, ma'am. We wish that we get connected with you and seek probably a few more answers. I'll email to you so that you can respond whenever you are free, and then we keep learning from you. Thank you very much for this time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks, ma'am. So ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you again next Friday on July 8th with yet another leader, Manisha Sabu. She will be talking about how do you accelerate your career journeys to get to the top. And it will be very, very interesting for the mid-career leaders from various walks of life, various domains, as you are from. And it will be very interesting to catch up at 4 p.m. July 8th with another leader, Ms. Manisha Sabu. Till then, do take care, and we'll come back on the next Friday. Thank you all.